Chapter 1. The Invitation to Frostwood Manor. The snow was falling gently over London, soft flakes drifting past the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions. It was mid-December, and the city had already surrendered to the festive spirit. Streets lined with twinkling lights, shop windows dressed in crimson and gold, carol singers gathering at corners. Yet, inside the impeccably ordered apartment, everything remained as precise and symmetrical as its occupant preferred. Hercule Poirot, the famous Belgian detective, sat in his favourite armchair by the fire, a small cup of thick sweet hot chocolate balanced delicately in his hand. He wore a silk dressing-gown of deep burgundy, and his famous moustache, those magnificent upward curls, was waxed to perfection. A copy of the Times lay folded neatly on the side table, but Poirot's attention was fixed upon a single envelope that had arrived with the morning post. The envelope was heavy cream paper, expensive, embossed with a crest, a stag rampant beneath a crown of holly leaves. The address was written in elegant copperplate: Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Whitehaven Mansions, London. Poirot turned the envelope over in his hands, admiring the scarlet wax seal. With a small, satisfied sigh, half curiosity, half anticipation, he slit it open with a silver letter-opener. Inside was a card, equally lavish, bordered in gold. Sir Reginald Harrington and Lady Harrington request the pleasure of the company of Monsieur Hercule Poirot at Frostwood Manor, Hampshire, from the 22nd to the 27th of December, for the celebration of Christmas and the unveiling of the famous Harrington diamond, known as the Christmas star. A smaller note, handwritten in bold, confident strokes, was enclosed. My dear Monsieur Poirot, I have long admired your extraordinary gifts. My wife and I would be deeply honoured if you would spend Christmas with us at Frostwood. The manor will be full of interesting people, excellent food, and, dare I say it, perhaps even a small puzzle or two to exercise those famous little grey cells. The Christmas star, our family's most treasured heirloom, will be displayed for the first time in 20 years on Christmas Eve. I do hope you will join us. Yours sincerely, Reginald Harrington Poirot, placed the card on the table and leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Tiens, he murmured to himself, an invitation to an English country house at Christmas. How very traditional, and how very intriguing. He had heard of Sir Reginald Harrington, a baronet of considerable wealth, owner of coal mines in the north and rubber plantations in Malaya. The Harrington diamond, the Christmas star, was legendary. A flawless stone of 60 carats, cut in the shape of an 8-pointed star, said to blaze with inner fire, like captured sunlight on snow. It had been acquired by Sir Reginald's grandfather in India during the days of the Raj, and since then had remained locked away. Emerging only on the rarest occasions. Why now? Poirot wondered. Why unveil it after 20 years? And why invite Hercule Poirot, a stranger, to witness the event? He rose and crossed to the window, gazing out at the muffled city. Snowflakes melted against the glass. Perhaps, he said softly, Sir Reginald anticipates trouble, or perhaps he merely wishes to impress his guests. Either way, Hercule Poirot does not refuse such an invitation. He turned briskly to his valet George, who had entered silently with a fresh pot of chocolate. George, we shall be travelling to the country for Christmas. Pack my warmest overcoat, the grey spats, and the new evening shoes with the patent leather tips. Also, the small travelling case for the toiletries. Everything must be in perfect order. George, accustomed to his master's sudden decisions, merely inclined his head. "Very good, sir." Shall I include the muffler with the monogram? May we? The English countryside in winter can be treacherous. 3 days later, on the afternoon of December 22nd, Poirot's Daimler purred smoothly down snow-dusted lanes deep in rural Hampshire. The driver navigated narrow roads flanked by hedgerows heavy with frost, until at last the manor came into view. Frostwood Manor stood atop a gentle rise, a sprawling Elizabethan house of mellow red brick, its chimneys already sending plumes of smoke into the pale sky. Tall mullioned windows glowed warmly against the winter dusk, and a massive wreath of holly and ivy adorned the oak front door. As the car crunched to a halt on the gravel sweep, Poirot noted the long row of vehicles already parked. A Rolls-Royce, a Bentley, several smaller motors, evidence of a substantial house party. A liveried footman opened the car door, and Poirot stepped out, drawing his overcoat close against the sharp air. He inhaled deeply, wood smoke, pine, and the faint crisp scent of snow. "Magnifique," he murmured. He was ushered through the great door into a vaulted entrance hall ablaze with light and warmth. A towering Christmas tree reached almost to the rafters, decorated entirely in silver and crystal, its hundreds of tiny candles flickering like stars. Garlands of evergreen draped the stone fireplace, where a Yule log roared. The air was rich with the aroma of spiced wine and roasting chestnuts. Waiting to greet him was Sir Reginald Harrington himself, tall, broad-shouldered, in his late 50s, with a ruddy face, a booming voice, and a military moustache that rivaled Poirot's own in ambition. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome, welcome!" He pumped Poirot's hand enthusiastically. "Delighted you could come. Dash it all, this is an honour." Poirot bowed with exquisite courtesy. "The honour is mine, Sir Reginald. Your invitation was most flattering." Lady Harrington glided forward next, a handsome woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed in deep green velvet, a rope of pearls at her throat. Her smile was warm, but Poirot detected a faint shadow of anxiety in her eyes. "We are so pleased you accepted," she said. "The house feels safer already with you here." Poirot's eyebrows rose a fraction. Safer? An interesting choice of word. Sir Reginald laughed heartily. "My wife worries too much. The Christmas star is perfectly secure. Vault, locks, the whole business. But one hears such tales these days of clever thieves. Still, nothing will spoil our festivities." He led Poirot toward the drawing-room, where early guests were already gathered around a blazing fire, glasses in hand. "Let me introduce you to a few people," Sir Reginald continued. "My son and heir, Captain Richard Harrington, home from India on leave. My niece, Miss Evelyn Drake, she's been staying with us since her father passed. Mr. Felix Carver, my business partner. And the divine Signorina Lucia Valenti, the opera singer, persuaded her to come and sing for us on Christmas Eve." Poirot observed each in turn as introductions were made. Captain Richard was a lean, sun-browned young man of 30, with restless eyes and a tight smile. Miss Evelyn Drake was strikingly pretty, dark-haired, perhaps 25, but there was a hardness about her mouth. Mr. Carver was plump, prosperous, with a watch chain heavy with gold seals. Signorina Valenti was all dramatic beauty, raven hair, flashing eyes, a scarlet gown that drew every gaze. Conversation flowed, the weather, the war in Europe, the latest plays in London. Yet beneath the polite laughter, Poirot sensed currents. Small glances exchanged, a hesitation before a smile, a hand that lingered too long on a glass. Dinner was announced at 8. The dining hall was a marvel. A long oak table gleaming with silver and crystal, candles in branched candelabra, centerpieces of holly and white roses. Place cards had been arranged with care. and Poirot found himself seated between Lady Harrington and Signorina Valenti. As the soup was served, clear consommé with a hint of sherry, Sir Reginald raised his glass. "To old friends and new," he declared, "and to the Christmas star which will shine for us all on Christmas Eve." Glasses clinked. Smiles were exchanged. But Poirot, ever observant, noticed that Captain Richard's toast was a fraction late, that Miss Evelyn's eyes avoided her uncle's, and that Mr. Carver's jovial laugh rang just a little too loudly. Later, as Poirot retired to his spacious guest chamber, fire crackling, four-poster bed hung with tapestry, he stood at the window, gazing out over the moonlit snow-covered gardens. The estate lay silent under its white blanket, the great tree in the hall still faintly visible through distant windows. He stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "Frostwood Manor," he whispered, "a beautiful setting for Christmas. But beauty often conceals danger. And already, mes amis, Hercule Poirot detects the faintest tremor of discord." He turned away from the window, a small smile curving his lips. "Let us see what the little grey cells can make of this English Christmas puzzle." Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, wrapping the manor in silence. Chapter 2. Arrival of the Guests. The following morning dawned crisp and bright, the sun glinting off the fresh blanket of snow that covered the lawns of Frostwood Manor. Hercule Poirot awoke early, as was his habit, and performed his toilette with meticulous care. He selected a charcoal grey suit, a waistcoat of subtle stripe, and a tie of deepest crimson, festive yet dignified. His moustache received its customary attention, and when he surveyed himself in the mirror, he gave a small nod of approval. "Parfait," he murmured. "One must always present oneself correctly, especially in the English countryside." Breakfast was served in a sunny morning room overlooking the rose garden, now buried under snow. Sir Reginald and Lady Harrington were already at table, along with Captain Richard Harrington and Miss Evelyn Drake. Poirot greeted them politely and took his place. The meal was substantial: porridge, kippers, eggs, bacon, devilled kidneys, toast with marmalade, and strong coffee for those who preferred it to tea. Conversation was light: the beauty of the snow, plans for the day, the arrival of more guests. Yet Poirot noted again the faint undercurrents. Captain Richard spoke little, his gaze often drifting to the window, as though longing to be elsewhere. Miss Evelyn toyed with her toast, her dark eyes flicking toward her cousin with something that might have been resentment. Lady Harrington chattered brightly to cover the silences. After breakfast, Poirot took a short walk in the gardens, breathing the sharp, clean air. The snow crunched beneath his polished boots, and he paused to admire the ancient yew hedges clipped into fantastical shapes. Footprints crisscrossed the paths, servants' errands, perhaps, or early risers. He observed them with interest, for footprints could tell much to the trained eye. By midday, the sound of motor cars announced new arrivals. First came Mr. Felix Carver, Sir Reginald's business partner. He emerged from a gleaming Bentley with a flourish, wrapped in a fur-lined coat and carrying a large leather case. He was a man of about 50, plump and prosperous, with small, shrewd eyes, and a ready smile that did not quite reach those eyes. "My dear Reginald," he boomed, clapping Sir Reginald on the shoulder. "What a splendid place! And this snow! Perfect for Christmas!" Introductions were made in the hall. When Carver shook Poirot's hand, his grip was firm, too firm perhaps, and his gaze lingered appraisingly. "The great Hercule Poirot," he said, "I've read about your cases. Quite extraordinary. I suppose you're here to keep an eye on the Christmas star, eh? Sensible precaution these days. Poirot smiled politely. I am here, monsieur, as a guest, nothing more. Carver chuckled. Of course, of course. Next to arrive was Signorina Lucia Valenti, the celebrated Italian soprano. Her car, a sporty Lancia, skidded slightly on the drive before coming to a dramatic halt. She stepped out in a swirl of mink and scarlet scarf, her black hair gleaming beneath a fashionable hat. Servants hurried to take her luggage, and she swept into the hall like a diva entering the stage. "Reginald, Caro!" she cried, kissing Sir Reginald on both cheeks. "And dear Lady Harrington, how beautiful you look! This house is magnificent. I shall sing for you all on Christmas Eve, something special, see?" Her eyes, dark and luminous, found Poirot. She extended a gloved hand. "And this must be the famous detective." "Enchanté, Monsieur Poirot. I have heard so much about you in Paris and Milan." Poirot bowed over her hand. "The pleasure is entirely mine, Signorina. Your voice is known even to those who, like myself, are not great patrons of the opera." She laughed, a rich musical sound. "You flatter me, but I warn you, I am superstitious. Diamonds, especially famous ones, bring bad luck. You will watch over us, see?" Poirot merely smiled. More guests trickled in throughout the afternoon. An elderly dowager aunt of Lady Harrington's, accompanied by her paid companion. A young army friend of Captain Richard's named Major Blake, hearty and loud. And finally, just before tea, a late arrival who caused something of a stir. The last car was a modest Austin, mud-splashed from a long journey. From it emerged a thin, sharp-featured man in his 40s, dressed in a dark overcoat that had seen better days. He carried a single battered suitcase. Sir Reginald's welcoming smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Ah, Mr. Sinclair," he said. "You made it." The newcomer nodded curtly. "Barely. Roads are treacherous." Introductions again. The man's name was Victor Sinclair, described vaguely as an old acquaintance from the Malayan days. He shook hands without warmth, his pale eyes scanning the assembled company. When he reached Poirot, there was a flicker of recognition. "Monsieur Poirot," he said quietly, "I've followed your career. Interesting that you're here." Poirot inclined his head. "Interesting indeed, monsieur." Tea was served in the drawing-room. Delicate sandwiches, scones with clotted cream, rich fruit cake. The conversation grew livelier as wine was poured. Signorina Valenti held court, telling stories of La Scala and Covent Garden. Mr. Carver discussed business prospects in rubber and coal. Major Blake recounted hunting tales from India. Yet Poirot, seated quietly in a corner, observed. He noticed how Captain Richard avoided Mr. Carver's eye when the latter spoke of new investments needed to secure the estate. He saw Miss Evelyn Drake's fingers tighten on her teacup when Signorina Valenti laughed at something Richard said. He noted that Victor Sinclair drank little and spoke less, his gaze often drifting toward the great Christmas tree in the hall, visible through the open doors. And then came the small incident that set Poirot's little grey cells stirring. Lady Harrington had arranged for small gifts to be hung on the tree, ornaments of silver and glass, each containing a tiny present for the guests. As the party moved into the hall to admire the tree more closely, Signorina Valenti exclaimed in delight, "Oh, how beautiful! Look, this one is shaped like a star." She reached up to touch a particularly lovely ornament, a crystal star containing what appeared to be a small pearl. But as her fingers brushed it, the ornament slipped from its hook and fell. There was a collective gasp. Major Blake lunged forward and caught it just before it hit the marble floor. Close shave, he laughed, handing it back to a flustered footman. But Poirot had seen something others missed. In the moment before the ornament fell, Victor Sinclair had taken a half-step forward, his hand outstretched, as though to catch it himself. And when it was safe, his expression had been one of relief or disappointment. The footman rehung the ornament higher this time. Lady Harrington laughed nervously. "How clumsy of me to hang them so low. We must be more careful." Dinner that evening was a grand affair. The table glittered with crystal and silver. The centrepiece a magnificent arrangement of holly, ivy, and white lilies. Sir Reginald, at the head, was in high spirits, carving a baron of beef with flourish. "To our guests," he toasted again, "and to tomorrow's arrivals, my sister and her husband from Scotland. The house will be full." Courses came and went. Turtle soup, roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, pheasant in plum sauce, a towering Christmas pudding flamed with brandy. Poirot, seated between Miss Evelyn Drake and the dowager aunt, engaged in polite conversation. But his attention wandered. He watched how Mr. Carver leaned close to Sir Reginald, speaking urgently about debts and new capital. He saw Captain Richard drain his wineglass quickly, too quickly. He noted that Victor Sinclair ate sparingly and left the table early, pleading fatigue from the journey. Later, as the ladies withdrew and the men lingered over port and cigars, Major Blake turned to Poirot. "I say, Mr. Poirot, you're the detective chap. Ever handle a jewel theft?" Poirot smiled urbanely. "From time to time, yes." "Thought so. Well, if anything happens to that Christmas star of old Reggie's, you'll have your work cut out. Heard it's worth a king's ransom." Sir Reginald laughed heartily. "Nothing will happen, Blake. The vault is in my study. Steel door, combination lock. The diamond stays there until Christmas Eve, when we'll display it under guard in the ballroom." "Still," Carver put in jovially, "good to have Poirot here, just in case." The men laughed, but Poirot did not. That night, as he prepared for bed, Poirot stood at his window again. The moon had risen, silvering the snow. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. He reviewed the day's arrivals in his mind: the prosperous Carver, the dramatic Valenti, the enigmatic Sinclair, the restless Richard, the bitter Evelyn. And the falling ornament, a small thing, perhaps an accident, or perhaps not. Poirot turned from the window and addressed his reflection in the mirror as he carefully unwound his tie. "Already there are too many people who want something from this house. Money, security, revenge, perhaps. Love, even." He smoothed his moustache. "And tomorrow the house will be fuller still. Hercule Poirot, mon ami, you must watch very carefully. For when a priceless diamond is to be displayed, human nature becomes unpredictable." Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world lay silent, waiting. Chapter 3. The Unveiling Ceremony. Christmas Eve arrived at Frostwood Manor like the climax of a perfectly rehearsed opera. Every corridor scented with pine and beeswax, every chandelier blazing, every servant moving with the silent precision of stagehands. Outside, the snow had ceased during the night, leaving the estate wrapped in a deep crystalline hush. Inside, excitement crackled like the logs in the dozen roaring fires. Hercule Poirot descended the grand staircase at precisely 7 o'clock, immaculate in white tie and tails. His patent leather pumps reflected the candlelight, and the famous moustache had received an extra degree of curl in honour of the occasion. As he reached the half-landing, he paused surveying the hall below. The great Christmas tree now dominated the entrance entirely. 15 feet tall, hung with 1,000 crystal drops that scattered light into rainbows. At its summit blazed a single electric star. Modern Sir Reginald had explained with pride, but tonight that star would be eclipsed by another. Servants in scarlet livery darted to and fro, carrying silver trays of champagne coupes already bubbling. The string quartet from Winchester tuned discreetly in the minstrel's gallery. Guests milled in evening gowns and jewels, their voices rising in a bright, nervous chorus. Poirot's sharp eyes catalogued them all. Lady Harrington, exquisite in midnight blue velvet and the Harrington sapphires, laughed too loudly at something Major Blake said. Captain Richard, rigid in mess dress, stood apart, staring fixedly at the ballroom doors. Miss Evelyn Drake wore emerald silk that made her pale skin almost translucent. Her fingers worried the diamond brooch at her throat as though it burned. Felix Carver, resplendent in wine-coloured velvet, was already on his second glass of champagne, talking animatedly to Victor Sinclair, who looked as though he had dressed for a funeral rather than a ball. And then there was Signorina Lucia Valenti. She entered late, deliberately late, in a gown of molten gold that left shoulders and much of her back bare. A single ruby glowed at her throat like a drop of fresh blood. Every head turned. She smiled, slow and regal, and the room seemed to exhale. Poirot descended the final steps. "Mon Dieu!" he murmured to himself. "What a collection of passions beneath one roof!" At 8 o'clock precisely, Sir Reginald clapped his hands for silence. The quartet ceased mid-phrase. "My friends," he boomed, cheeks flushed with pride and champagne, "the moment has come. For 20 years the Christmas star has rested in darkness. Tonight, on this holiest of eves, we bring it into the light once more." A ripple of applause. Lady Harrington's smile looked brittle. 2 footmen wheeled forward a pedestal draped in black velvet. Upon it stood a glass case, reinforced with steel, its lock gleaming. Sir Reginald produced a small key on a gold chain, and, with theatrical slowness, unlocked the case and raised the lid. Inside, on a cushion of white satin, lay the diamond. Even Poirot, who had seen the Koh-i-Noor and the Hope, caught his breath. The Christmas star was not merely large, it was alive. 60 carats cut into an 8-pointed radiant star. It blazed with a pure cold fire that seemed to draw every candle flame in the house into itself. When Sir Reginald lifted it, carefully, reverently, on a slender platinum chain, the facets exploded into red, green, and golden sparks, as though the stone had captured the very spirit of Christmas. Gasps, murmurs. A woman's soft cry of wonder. Sir Reginald held it high. "To absent friends," he declared, "and to the future of this house." He lowered the diamond into a second, smaller display case, fixed beneath the great tree. Bullet-proof glass, he had assured everyone earlier, with an electrical alarm connected directly to the local constabulary. A liveried footman stood to attention beside it, and a second watched from the gallery above. The quartet struck up "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." Champagne flowed anew. Couples moved onto the floor as the ballroom doors were flung open, revealing a space transformed. Mirrors draped in holly, hundreds of white roses, a ceiling painted with silver stars that glittered beneath concealed lights. Poirot accepted a glass but did not drink. He circulated, ears pricked, eyes everywhere. He saw Captain Richard approach his father, face tight with suppressed anger. "Really, sir, must we parade it like this? It's asking for trouble." "Nonsense, my boy. Tradition. Besides, every precaution has been taken." Richard's jaw clenched. "Tradition won't pay the debts, father." Sir Reginald's smile faltered for an instant, then broadened again. Enjoy the evening, Richard." Poirot drifted closer to Miss Evelyn Drake, who stood alone near the tree staring at the diamond as though mesmerized. "It is beautiful, is it not, mademoiselle?" he asked softly. She started. "Beautiful? Yes, and cursed. My great-grandfather won it in a card game from a Maharaja who later took his own life. They say the stone brings ruin to any house that keeps it too long." Her voice trembled with something between fear and longing. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And yet your uncle displays it. Uncle Reginald believes he can break the curse with a grand gesture." She laughed bitterly. "Or perhaps he simply needs the money it would fetch at auction." Before Poirot could pursue this, Signorina Valenti swept up, trailing admirers. "Monsieur Poirot, you must dance with me. I refuse to allow the most interesting man in the room to stand like a statue all night." With gallant grace, Poirot allowed himself to be led into a waltz. Over her bare shoulder, he watched the room revolve. He saw Felix Carver in earnest conversation with Victor Sinclair near the French windows. Sinclair shaking his head violently, Carver's hand gripping the thinner man's arm. He saw the footman by the tree glance at his watch, then subtly shift position so that his body blocked the view of the case from one angle. He saw Lady Harrington touch the glass over the diamond as though saying goodbye. And he saw, high in the musicians' gallery, the second guard yawn and stretch, only for a second, but long enough for his eyes to leave the jewel below. The waltz ended. Applause? Signorina Valenti laughed breathlessly. "You dance divinely, monsieur, but your mind is elsewhere, see? You watch that stone like a hawk." "Old habits, signorina. One never quite retires from observation." At 11 o'clock, the great clock in the hall began to chime. Sir Reginald called for silence once more. "My friends, in 20 minutes we shall toast the birth of Christmas at midnight. Until then, let us enjoy the final dances." The orchestra launched into the skater's waltz. Laughter rose. Couples whirled. Poirot positioned himself near the tree, ostensibly admiring the diamond. In reality, he studied reflections in the polished grand piano across the room. Reflections that showed him the French windows behind him, the staircase, the gallery, 11:50, 11:55. The chimes began again, slow, sonorous. 1, 2, 3. At the 8th chime, the lights flickered just once, as though a giant hand had brushed the switches. A collective "oh" of surprise. Darkness, total, for 2 heartbeats. Then the lights blazed back. But in those 2 heartbeats, the atmosphere had changed. A woman screamed. The footman beside the case shouted, "It's gone!" Pandemonium. Guests surged forward, then recoiled. Sir Reginald pushed through, face ashen. The glass case beneath the tree stood intact. The tiny red alarm light glowed steady, untriggered. The lock showed no sign of tampering. Yet the white satin cushion inside was bare. The Christmas star had vanished as completely as though it had never existed. In the stunned silence that followed, Poirot's calm voice cut through like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "nobody is to leave this room. The theft occurred within the last 10 seconds, in full view of more than 40 people. The Christmas star is still among us." He turned to the footman, who stood white-faced and trembling. "And you, mon ami, what exactly did you see?" The man swallowed. "Nothing, sir. I swear it. The lights went out, then came back, and it was just gone." Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on every face now lit by shock, guilt, fear, and triumph. Outside, the midnight bells continued to toll, marking the birth of Christmas Day. Inside Frostwood Manor, Something darker had just been born. Chapter 4. The Midnight Alarm. The ballroom of Frostwood Manor, so lately a place of music and light, had become a tableau of frozen shock. 40 guests stood as though turned to stone, champagne glasses halfway to lips, faces bleached by the sudden brutality of the theft. The great clock finished its 12th chime, and the echo died into a silence so complete that Poirot could hear the faint hiss of melting snow dripping from boots onto the marble floor. Sir Reginald Harrington was the first to move. He lunged toward the empty display case, hands outstretched as if he could will the diamond back into existence. "Impossible!" he roared, voice cracking. "The glass is unbroken. The alarm never sounded." Lady Harrington swayed. Major Blake caught her elbow just in time. Signorina Valenti crossed herself swiftly, her golden gown suddenly garish against her pallor. Captain Richard stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. Only Victor Sinclair seemed unmoved, his thin face expressionless in the chandelier light. Poirot stepped forward, small and precise, raising one hand. "Silence, if you please. Panic serves no one. The Christmas star was here 10 seconds ago. It is here still, somewhere in this house." His calm voice cut through the hysteria like a scalpel. Guests turned toward him instinctively, as though he were the only fixed point in a tilting world. "First," Poirot continued, "we establish facts. The lights failed for how long?" The footman who had guarded the case found his voice. 2 seconds, sir. No more. I felt the darkness. Then the lights returned and the cushion was empty." Poirot nodded. "And you, monsieur, stood here?" He positioned the trembling man exactly where he had been. "Yes, sir. Never moved." Poirot turned to the second guard in the gallery above. "And you?" I looked down the whole time, sir. Swear it. Nothing moved near the case." Poirot's eyes swept the room. Yet something moved. Something extraordinarily swift and clever. He addressed the assembly. "No one is to leave this room until I permit it. The outer doors are locked against the snow in any case. We are isolated, an island in white. The thief is among us." A murmur rippled outward. Accusing glances flew like arrows. "Sir," Reginald recovered his voice. "Poirot, you must take charge. I place myself entirely in your hands. Très bien, then we begin." Poirot moved with brisk efficiency. First he examined the display case itself. The glass was intact, the lock undamaged, the tiny alarm wire ran unbroken around the base. He tested the cushion, nothing concealed within its shallow depth. Next, the floor around the pedestal, polished marble, unmarked except for wet footprints from dancing shoes, no scuff, no scratch. He looked up at the chandelier and the ceiling roses, no sign of wires or mechanisms. The brief darkness had been general, every light in the hall and ballroom extinguished simultaneously. "Someone reached the main fuse box," Major Blake suggested. "Cut the current for those vital seconds." Poirot shook his head. "The fuse box is in the cellar, locked, and the key is on Sir Reginald's chain. Besides, the lights returned too swiftly. This was no crude cutting of wires." He turned to Sir Reginald. "The original carrying case, the one in which you brought the diamond from the study, where is it?" Sir Reginald pointed to a small table near the tree. The black velvet case lay open and empty. Poirot examined it minutely, then the pedestal, then the tree itself. Nothing. Outside the wind had risen, snow lashed against the tall windows like thrown gravel. The telephone wires, Sir Reginald confirmed grimly, had gone down in the storm hours earlier. They were cut off from the world until the snowplough came, perhaps not until Boxing Day. Poirot straightened. "We must search every person here, discreetly but thoroughly. Ladies will retire to the morning room with Lady Harrington and Signorina Valenti. Gentlemen remain here with myself and Sir Reginald." Protests arose, indignant, frightened, but Poirot's authority held. Slowly, reluctantly, the ladies filed out under Lady Harrington's wan guidance. The men submitted to gentle but firm searches, conducted by Sir Reginald and Major Blake under Poirot's watchful eye. Nothing, no diamond, no hiding place large enough to conceal it. The ladies returned one by one, pale but empty-handed. Poirot's frustration was masked behind impeccable calm, but his little grey cells worked furiously. At 2 a.m, he permitted the exhausted guests to retire, posting footmen at every staircase and corridor. "Sleep if you can," he told them. "Tomorrow, Christmas Day, we continue." But sleep was impossible for most. Poirot himself did not attempt it. He sat in the library with Sir Reginald, a brandy untouched before him, while outside the storm howled like a living thing. Sir Reginald's ruddy face had collapsed into lines of strain. "It's ruin, Poirot. The diamond was uninsured, too valuable, they said. And the estate, debts piled up these 10 years. I thought displaying it might attract a wealthy buyer discreetly. Instead—" He buried his face in his hands. Poirot spoke gently. "Tell me about the debts." Sir Reginald sighed. "Coal mines failing, rubber prices collapsed. Carver has been pressing for fresh capital, threatening to call in loans. Richard knows it. He's furious I won't sell land. Evelyn believes she was cheated of her inheritance when her father died. Even Sinclair, he was my partner in Malaya years ago, claims I owe him a fortune from an old venture." Poirot listened, filing each motive away. At 4 o'clock he conducted a second examination of the ballroom, alone this time, with only a torch. He studied every reflection again, measured distances, timed how long it would take to cross from various points to the case. He discovered 3 small clues. First, a single glove of fine grey kid leather lay half hidden beneath the skirt of the Christmas tree. It had not been there earlier, he was certain. The glove was a left hand, slightly damp, as though it had recently been outside. Second, on the marble floor near the French windows, a faint smear, barely visible, of wet snow. Someone had opened those windows briefly, perhaps. Third, high on the tree, almost at the top where the electric star blazed, one crystal ornament had been moved. Its hook was bent, as though something had brushed past it with force. Poirot stood beneath the tree, looking up. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." Dawn came late, a sullen grey light filtering through snow-laden clouds. The house stirred reluctantly. Servants whispered in corridors. Guests emerged hollow-eyed. Poirot gathered everyone in the drawing-room at 10 o'clock. The great tree still dominated the hall beyond the open doors, mockingly festive. "I have news," Poirot announced. 3 discoveries." He held up the grey glove. "This was found beneath the tree. Does anyone claim it?" Silence. Every man glanced surreptitiously at his own gloves or bare hands. Next, he described the snow smear and the bent hook. "Someone," he concluded, "moved very close to the tree indeed, close enough to risk dislodging ornaments. Someone perhaps taller than average, or someone who climbed." Captain Richard flushed angrily. "Are you suggesting—" "I suggest nothing yet, Capitaine, I observe." He turned to the footman who had stood guard. "You are certain you never left your post?" "On my life, sir." "And yet the thief passed within 2 feet of you in complete darkness, and removed the diamond from a case whose lid was already open, without touching the alarm wire." The footman began to tremble again. Poirot's voice softened. "Perhaps you blinked. Perhaps you turned your head for one instant when the lights failed." The man shook his head violently. Outside, the wind dropped suddenly. In the hush, they heard it. A faint, rhythmic crunching, the sound of a snowplough far down the valley road. Help, perhaps, by afternoon. But Poirot knew the thief would not wait. He dismissed the assembly, with instructions that no one was to go outside alone, then drew Sir Reginald aside. "Your study, where the vault is. May I examine it again?" Together they climbed the stairs. The study was oak-panelled, severe, with a modern steel safe let into the wall behind a false bookcase. Sir Reginald opened it. Empty, of course. The diamond had been removed only yesterday for the ceremony. Poirot examined the floor, the window, the fireplace. And there, in the cold grate, he found the fourth clue. A tiny scrap of blackened paper, part of a torn envelope, the handwriting visible. "Meet me at midnight. Urgent." Sir Reginald stared. "That's my writing paper, but I burned nothing yesterday." Poirot pocketed the fragment carefully. "Someone, mon ami, used your study very recently. Someone who wished to destroy evidence." He paused at the window. Fresh snow had covered the sill, but beneath the new fall he could just discern older marks, scratches on the paint, as though a window had been forced from outside earlier in the week. "The plot thickens," Poirot said softly, "and the net begins to close." Downstairs, the Christmas breakfast awaited, turkey, ham, eggs, champagne. But no one had appetite. The house felt besieged by more than snow. Poirot returned to the hall and stood once more beneath the great tree, gazing up at the electric star. Higher, he thought. The answer lies higher. And in that moment, watching the crystal drops quiver in a sudden draught from the chimney, Hercule Poirot felt the first genuine stir of excitement. The little grey cells were awakening fully now. The hunt was truly on. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Library. The afternoon of Christmas Day at Frostwood Manor felt less like a festival and more like a wake. The storm had spent itself during the night, leaving a heavy, oppressive silence over the snowbound estate. No church bells reached them from the village, no carol singers braved the drifts. The great house seemed to hold its breath. Hercule Poirot, however, was very much awake. While the other guests picked without enthusiasm at cold turkey and plum pudding in the dining room, Poirot slipped away to the library. It was a long, handsome room, panelled in dark oak, lined with leather-bound volumes that smelled of age and beeswax. A fire crackled in the Adam fireplace, but the tall windows let in only a cold, pearl-grey light. Poirot closed the door softly behind him and stood for a moment surveying the space with satisfaction. Here, away from the strained politeness of the drawing-room, he could think. He began methodically. First, he examined the French windows that opened onto the terrace. They were locked now, but faint scratches on the brass catch told their own story. Someone had forced them from outside in the last few days. Snow had been brushed from the sill, but a few melted droplets remained in the cracks of the stone floor beneath. An entry prepared in advance, Poirot murmured. The thief did not rely only on the confusion of the ball. Next, he turned to the shelves. The Harringtons were not great readers, but there were rows of family histories, ledgers, and photograph albums. Poirot pulled down a heavy volume entitled The Harringtons of Frostwood, a chronicle published privately in 1898. He carried it to the fire and sat in a wing chair, turning the thick pages with care. The Christmas star appeared first in a sepia photograph dated 1887. Sir Reginald's grandfather, Colonel Archibald Harrington, in full dress uniform, holding the diamond aloft beside a smiling Indian prince. The caption read, "Acquired at the Durbar of Maharaja Ranjit Singh in settlement of certain obligations." Poirot's eyebrows rose. Obligations, a polite word for gambling debts, perhaps. Later entries were less triumphant. A newspaper clipping from 1910 recorded the suicide of the same Maharaja, despondent after heavy losses. Another from 1923 reported the bankruptcy of a Harrington cousin who had borrowed against the family diamond. Poirot closed the book thoughtfully. A stone with a history of ruin. Miss Drake spoke truly. It carries a curse, or at least the memory of one. He replaced the volume and moved to a glass-fronted cabinet containing family papers. It was locked, but the key hung conveniently on a nearby hook, a carelessness typical of English country houses. Inside he found bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, account books, and a slim folder marked Christmas Star, Provenance and Valuation. Poirot opened it eagerly. The most recent document was a valuation from a Bond Street jeweller, dated only 3 months earlier. Estimated current value, $180,000 to $220,000. Unique historic stone, uninsured due to risk. Beneath it lay an older letter in a spidery hand, dated 1905, from Colonel Harrington to his son. "My dear boy, the star is both blessing and burden. Guard it well. Men have killed for less, and women wept. If ever the estate falters, sell it quietly. Never display it publicly again. Public display invites catastrophe. Your loving father." Poirot read the warning twice. Sir Reginald had ignored it completely. There were also insurance papers, lapsed policies from the 1920s, and a rejected application from last year. The underwriters had refused on grounds of excessive risk and inadequate security arrangements. Poirot replaced the folder exactly as he had found it. He was about to close the cabinet when a thinner volume caught his eye, wedged behind the others, a small black notebook, its cover cracked with age. He drew it out. The first page bore the initials V.S. in faded ink, Victor Sinclair. Poirot's pulse quickened. He carried the notebook to the light. It was a diary, or rather a record of grievances. Entries stretched back 20 years, written in a precise, bitter hand. 1919, Malaya. R.H. promises equal share in rubber venture. Receives concession, alone. 1921, London. R.H. denies knowledge of agreement. Laughs. 1924, loan of 5,000 refused. Estate entailed. 1935, final appeal. Threatens exposure of Indian affair. R.H. offers pittance. Refused. The last entry, dated only a fortnight ago. December 10th, Frostwood. The star will be displayed, an opportunity at last. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Poirot closed the notebook slowly. A clear motive, revenge and greed combined. Yet Sinclair had been searched like everyone else. Where could he have hidden the diamond? A soft creak interrupted his thoughts. The library door opened a fraction, then wider. Miss Evelyn Drake slipped inside, closing it behind her. She wore a simple wool dress of dark red, her face pale without its usual careful makeup. She started when she saw Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, I didn't know anyone was here." He bowed slightly. "I find the library conducive to thought, mademoiselle. And you?" She hesitated. "I came for a book, something to distract me from all this." Her eyes flicked to the cabinet still ajar. Poirot smiled urbanely. "A wise choice, but perhaps you seek more than distraction." She coloured. "What do you mean? You stare often at the place where the diamond rested. You spoke yesterday of its curse. Yet I think you feel something else. Regret, perhaps, that it will never be yours?" Her chin lifted defiantly. "Why should it not be? My father was the elder son. If grandfather had not lost everything at cards, the estate would have come to us. Instead, Uncle Reginald inherited, and now he'll lose it all to debts. The star should have been divided years ago. Divided? Poirot echoed gently. Or sold to save the family? Sold, she laughed bitterly. Uncle Reginald would never sell. Pride, you see. Harrington pride. She moved closer, voice dropping. If it's truly gone, perhaps it's for the best. Let someone else bear the curse. Poirot watched her carefully. And if it is recovered? Her eyes flashed. Then nothing changes. Richard will inherit ruin. Uncle will borrow more from Mr. Carver, and the stone will go back into its vault to rot. She turned abruptly and left, the door closing with unnecessary force. Poirot remained motionless for a long moment, then returned to his search. He examined the fireplace next. The grate was clean, but behind the fireback he found a small heap of ash. Recent paper burned hastily. Among the grey flakes glinted a fragment of green sealing wax, the same shade as that used on Sir Reginald's personal correspondence. Someone had destroyed letters here very recently. As he straightened, a shadow fell across the rug. Captain Richard Harrington stood in the doorway, still in riding boots, snow on his shoulders. "Thought I'd find you here, Poirot," he said curtly, "poking about." Poirot inclined his head. "Observing, Capitaine. It is my métier." Richard entered, closing the door. His young face was hard. "Look here. I know what everyone thinks, that I took it to pay father's debts, or that I want to force a sale, but I swear to you, I didn't touch the damned thing." Poirot studied him. "Yet you quarrelled with your father about displaying it." "Of course I did. It was madness. But I am a soldier. I don't sneak about in the dark like a thief." His voice shook with anger or fear. Poirot spoke softly. "Tell me, Capitaine, where were you precisely when the lights failed?" Richard met his gaze steadily. "Dancing with Signorina Valenti. She'll confirm it. Half the room saw us." "Indeed, but 2 seconds of darkness is a lifetime to a determined man." Richard flushed. "Then search my room again. Tear it apart. You'll find nothing." He strode out, boots ringing on the polished floor. Poirot remained alone once more. He moved to the window and gazed out over the terrace. Fresh footprints crossed the snow. Richard's, no doubt, from a solitary walk. But beneath them, half filled by drifting, were older tracks. Narrow, deep at the toe, as though someone had run lightly toward the house late last night. He turned back to the room. On a side table lay a pile of yesterday's newspapers. Poirot flicked through them idly, then paused. One carried a small item circled in red ink. "Noted jewel thief the Phantom, believed in England, specializes in impossible disappearances at society events." Poirot's moustache twitched. A professional? Brought in by someone inside the house? He folded the paper carefully. The library clock struck 4. Outside, the short winter day was already fading. Poirot gathered his discoveries. The forced window, the Colonel's warning, Sinclair's notebook, the burned fragments, the newspaper item. Pieces of a puzzle. Sharp, dangerous pieces. He slipped Sinclair's notebook into his pocket. Evidence must be preserved. And left the library as quietly as he had entered. In the corridor, he encountered Felix Carver, hurrying toward the study, face flushed. "Ah, Poirot," Carver said, forcing joviality. "Any progress?" "Much observation," Poirot replied pleasantly. "Little conclusion yet." Carver's smile faltered. "Well, keep at it. We're all depending on you." He disappeared into the study. Poirot watched him go, then continued toward the main staircase. As he passed the great Christmas tree in the hall, still blazing with its 100 lights, mocking in its beauty, He paused and looked up again at the bent ornament near the top. Higher, he thought once more. The answer lies higher. And in the flickering shadows cast by the tree, Hercule Poirot felt the presence of the thief as clearly as though a hand had brushed his shoulder. The house was full of secrets, and the library had yielded only the first layer. But the little grey cells were turning faster now, connecting motive to opportunity, history to present, greed. Soon, very soon, the pattern would emerge. Chapter 6. The Servants' Quarters. Boxing Day dawned clear and bitterly cold. The sun rose pale over the snowfields, turning the drifts to blinding white, but no warmth reached Frostwood Manor. The telephone lines remained down, the lanes impassable. The house party, now more prison than celebration, moved like ghosts through corridors that smelled of stale evergreen and suspicion. Hercule Poirot, however, was energized. He had spent the night in thought, reviewing every word, every glance, every footprint in the snow. By breakfast, he had decided. The guests had been questioned, searched, observed. Now it was time to descend below stairs. The servants' hall lay at the rear of the house, reached by a green baize door that separated the two worlds as effectively as any wall. Poirot pushed through it shortly after 10 o'clock, having requested Sir Reginald's permission to interview the staff privately. The hall was warm and bustling despite the crisis above. A long table was set with the remains of the servants' own Christmas dinner. Roast goose, sausages, ale. Mrs. Harding, the housekeeper, a stout woman of 50 with iron-grey hair and a face like a benevolent bulldog, rose at once. "Monsieur Poirot, sir? Sir Reginald said you'd be coming. We're all at your disposal." Poirot bowed with courtesy. "Madame, you are most kind. I wish only to speak with those who were on duty in the ballroom and hall on Christmas Eve." Mrs. Harding nodded and summoned them. The two footmen who had guarded the diamond, Thomas and young Wilkins, the butler, Mr. Graves, 3 parlour-maids, the chef, Monsieur Dubois, and Lady Harrington's personal maid, Miss Fletcher. They assembled in the housekeeper's sitting-room, a cosy space with chintz curtains and a canary in a cage. Poirot took the armchair by the fire. The servants stood or sat stiffly on hard chairs, faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Poirot began gently. "You understand that a very serious theft has occurred. I seek only the truth. No one here is accused, yet each of you may have seen something vital." He started with Thomas, the senior footman who had stood beside the display case. "Tell me again, Thomas, what exactly did you feel and hear during those 2 seconds of darkness?" Thomas, a tall man with military bearing, shifted uncomfortably. "Just darkness, sir. Complete. Then the lights came back, and the diamond was gone. I never took my eyes off the case, I swear it." Poirot nodded. "And your hands, where were they?" "At my side, sir. Regulation. Yet the thief passed within inches of you, and lifted the stone from its cushion without disturbing the alarm wire. Remarkable skill, or remarkable luck." Thomas flushed. "I can't explain it, sir." Poirot turned to young Wilkins, the gallery guard. "And you, mon gars, you had the higher view." Wilkins, barely 20, twisted his cap in his hands. "I was looking down the whole time, sir. But, well, the lights going out sudden like that. It was a shock. Maybe I blinked." "Perhaps," Poirot said softly. "Or perhaps something distracted you a fraction earlier." Wilkins coloured deeply. Poirot let the silence hang, then moved to Mr. Graves, the butler, thin, dignified, 50 years in service. "Monsieur Graves, you supervised the staff that evening. Did anything unusual occur before the unveiling?" Graves hesitated. "One small matter, sir. One of the parlour-maids, Annie, reported seeing a gentleman in the upper corridor near Sir Reginald's study around 6 o'clock. She thought it odd, as guests usually keep to the main floors. Which gentleman? She couldn't be sure in the dim light, sir, but he wore evening dress and carried something small, perhaps a glove. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The grey glove found beneath the tree. And this Annie, she is here. Mrs. Harding sent for her. Annie proved to be a nervous girl of 18 with freckles and red hands. She confirmed the sighting, but could not identify the man. Too tall for Mr. Sinclair, too thin for Mr. Carver, she offered timidly. Might have been Captain Richard, but I wouldn't swear to it. Poirot thanked her and dismissed her. Next he questioned Miss Fletcher, Lady Harrington's maid, a sharp-featured woman of 35 with shrewd eyes. You dress Lady Harrington, no? You know the family intimately? Fletcher inclined her head. 20 years with her ladyship, sir. Then tell me, has anyone in the house shown unusual interest in the Christmas star in recent weeks? Fletcher glanced at Mrs. Harding, then spoke carefully. Miss Evelyn, sir. She asked me once if I'd ever seen it close to. Said her father used to tell stories about it when she was little. And Mr. Sinclair, he came to the servants' hall the day he arrived, asking questions about the vault in the study. Said he was reminiscing about old times in Malaya. But Thomas told him nothing. Poirot filed this away. He turned finally to Monsieur Dubois, the French chef, a volatile man with a magnificent moustache that rivaled Poirot's own. And you, monsieur, your kitchens are busy on Christmas Eve. Did any stranger pass through? Dubois threw up his hands. Mais non, my kitchens are sacred. But he lowered his voice dramatically. One of the scullery lads saw a light in the old still-room after midnight. Thought it was rats at first. When he looked, the door was locked again. The still-room, disused at the far end of the basement corridor. Poirot's interest quickened. This lad, bring him. The boy, Bertie, 14 and terrified, confirmed the story. A faint glow under the door around 12:30, then nothing. Poirot dismissed the group with thanks and, accompanied by Mrs. Harding, descended deeper into the basement. The servants' quarters were a I've Warren. Kitchens steaming with copper pans, laundry rooms heavy with soap and steam, pantries, wine cellar, the silent still-room. Mrs. Harding unlocked the still-room door with a key from her chatelaine. The room smelled of dust and old herbs. Shelves lined the walls, empty jars ranked like soldiers. A single high window was barred and thick with frost. Poirot's torchbeam swept the floor. There, near the old copper preserving pan, fresh scratches on the stone, as though something heavy had been dragged. And in the corner, half hidden behind a broken crate, a bundle wrapped in a servant's apron. He knelt carefully and unwrapped it. Inside, a small silver salver, 2 candlesticks, a Georgian teapot, all items reported missing from the plate pantry over the last 6 months. Petty thefts, long puzzling the housekeeper, but no diamond. Mrs. Harding gasped. So there's been a thief below stairs all along. Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps someone wished you to think so. He examined the high window. The bars were old but solid, yet one showed fresh tool marks, as though someone had tested them. And on the sill, a single strand of dark hair, long, silky, a woman's. Poirot pocketed it carefully. As they returned upstairs, Mrs. Harding confided in a low voice. There's bad feeling below stairs, sir. Some of the younger maids resent the family, talk of them upstairs living like kings while we scrape. And Thomas, he's been courting Annie, but she favours young Wilkins. Jealousy, you see. Poirot nodded. Class resentment, romantic rivalry, fertile ground for mischief. Back in the green baize corridor, he paused. One more thing, madame. The fuse box for the main lights, is it near the kitchens?" "In the cellar passage, sir. Locked, but we all have access if needed." "Show me." The fuse box was intact, no sign of tampering. Yet Poirot noted that a chair stood nearby, as though someone had waited there in comfort. He thanked Mrs. Harding and returned to the upper house. In the hall, the great Christmas tree still blazed mockingly. Guests drifted about, speaking in hushed tones. Signorina Valenti was at the piano, playing a melancholy Chopin nocturne. Captain Richard stood staring out at the snow. Victor Sinclair sat alone, reading or pretending to. Poirot climbed the stairs slowly, assembling the morning's harvest. A glimpse of a tall man near the study. Questions about the vault. A light in the still room. Stolen silver hidden there. Tool marks on bars. A woman's hair. Petty jealousies among the staff. And always the question: how had the diamond been removed in 2 seconds of darkness, past a vigilant guard, without triggering the alarm? He paused on the landing, looking down at the tree. "Higher," his mind insisted again. Suddenly, a new thought struck him. He descended quickly and approached Thomas, who was polishing silver in the pantry. "Thomas, one question. The display case on Christmas Eve. The lid was raised for the unveiling, yes?" "Yes, sir. Sir Reginald lifted it himself." "And after the diamond was placed inside, was the lid lowered again?" Thomas frowned. "No, sir. It was left open, so everyone could see the stone clearly when the lights came back after the toast." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci. You have been most helpful." He turned away, mind racing. An open case. No need to lift a lid in the dark, only to reach in and grasp. 2 seconds was suddenly possible. But who? And where was the diamond now? As he passed the servants' door once more, he heard raised voices, Annie crying, Thomas arguing with Wilkins. Human passions, Poirot reflected, were the same above and below stairs. Love, envy, greed. The net was tightening, but the thief was clever, very clever, and the snow still held them prisoner. Poirot returned to his room and stood at the window, watching the white world beyond. "Patience," he told himself. "The pieces are falling into place. Soon the picture will be complete." But in the quiet, he felt the pressure of time. The snowplow would come eventually. The thief knew this. The Christmas star must be found before the world returned to Frostwood Manor. Chapter 7. A Yuletide Interrogation. The morning of December 27th brought the first real hope of release. Far down the valley, the distant growl of a snowplow echoed like a promise. By afternoon, the lane might be cleared. By evening, the police could reach Frostwood Manor. Hercule Poirot knew the thief felt the same urgency. Time was running out. He decided on a bold stroke. At 11 o'clock, he requested every guest and every senior servant to assemble in the long drawing-room. Fires blazed at both ends. The tall windows framed a world of dazzling white. The great Christmas tree, its lights now extinguished, stood in the hall beyond the open double doors like a silent witness. The company gathered reluctantly. Sir Reginald and Lady Harrington sat together on a sofa, both pale and drawn. Captain Richard leaned against the mantel, arms folded. Miss Evelyn Drake perched on the edge of a chair, twisting a handkerchief. Felix Carver puffed nervously at a cigar. Victor Sinclair sat apart, hands motionless in his lap. Signorina Valenti, dramatic even in daylight, wore black velvet and a single white camellia in her hair. Major Blake and the Dowager Aunt completed the circle of guests. The servants, Mrs. Harding, Mr. Graves, Thomas, Wilkins, and Miss Fletcher, stood respectfully near the door. Poirot took his position in the centre of the room, small, immaculate, utterly commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise. "We approach the end of this affair. The Christmas star disappeared 3 nights ago in a manner seemingly impossible. Yet nothing is impossible to Hercule Poirot when human nature is understood." He paused, letting the silence deepen. "I have questioned you individually. Have searched rooms, examined footprints, studied motives. Many of you have secrets, debts, resentments, old betrayals. Some of you have lied." A rustle of unease. Poirot raised a hand. "But lies are like snowflakes, beautiful from a distance, yet they melt under examination." He began to walk slowly around the room, eyes flicking from face to face. "Let us review the facts once more. The lights failed for exactly 2 seconds. The display case was open. The alarm did not sound. The diamond vanished while 40 people watched, and a guard stood 2 feet away. Many things were possible in those 2 seconds. A swift hand could reach in and grasp the stone. But then, what? To hide a diamond the size of a walnut, one needs concealment prepared in advance." He stopped before Captain Richard. "You, Capitaine, quarrelled openly with your father about displaying the jewel. You fear ruin for the estate. You were dancing when the lights failed. Yet a soldier is trained to move quickly in darkness." Richard's jaw tightened. "I've told you, I didn't take it." Poirot nodded and moved on to Felix Carver. "You, monsieur, hold Sir Reginald's debts. A recovered diamond might force a sale you do not wish, or its disappearance might allow you to foreclose." Carver blustered. "Nonsense! I stand to lose a fortune if the estate collapses." Next, Victor Sinclair. "You, monsieur, carry an old grudge. Your notebook, yes, I have read it, speaks of justice long delayed. You arrived late, asked questions about the vault, and were seen near the study." Sinclair's pale eyes met Poirot's without flinching. "Grudge, yes. Theft, no." Poirot turned to Miss Evelyn Drake. "You, mademoiselle, believe the diamond should have been yours by right. You spoke of its curse, yet your eyes lingered on it with longing." Evelyn's voice shook. "I hated seeing it paraded, but I never touched it." Signorina Valenti lifted her chin. "And me, monsieur, do you accuse the diva?" Poirot smiled faintly. "You, Signorina, warned of bad luck from famous jewels. You danced with many partners, including Captain Richard, at the crucial moment. A clever woman could pass something small in the dark." She laughed, rich and unafraid. "But I have no need of diamonds. I have my voice." Poirot continued his circuit, pausing before the servants, and below stairs, jealousies, romances, petty thefts of silver to cast suspicion elsewhere. "Thomas, your alibi is your post beside the case, yet you admit the thief passed within inches. Wilkins, you blinked in the gallery. Miss Fletcher, you know every secret of the dressing rooms." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Wilkins went scarlet. Poirot stopped in the centre again. "Now, a demonstration." He beckoned Thomas forward and positioned him exactly as he had stood on Christmas Eve. "Imagine the case here." He placed a small occasional table. The diamond rests inside. The lights fail. In darkness, someone reaches past you. He moved swiftly, his hand darting to the table and withdrawing as though grasping something. 2 seconds possible, yes, but the thief must then conceal the stone instantly. Pockets were searched, sleeves, gloves, hair, nothing. Yet one place was not thoroughly searched. He turned dramatically toward the hall. The Christmas tree itself. A collective intake of breath. Poirot walked into the hall and stood beneath the great tree. Its branches were dense, loaded with ornaments, tinsel, crystal drops. "High up," he said, "near the top where no one looks, Among the angels and stars there is space. A diamond on its chain could be hooked onto a branch in darkness, hidden by glittering decorations. The bent hook I noticed, the dislodged ornament, told the tale. And later, when the house slept, the thief could return with a ladder or a long pole to retrieve it. He looked up at the dark green foliage, but the thief grew nervous. The snowplough approaches. Recovery must happen soon. Sir Reginald rose, voice hoarse. Then it's still here, in the tree. Poirot shook his head. No longer. Last night someone tried to retrieve it, and almost succeeded. Gasps. He held up a small object. A broken crystal star. Its wire hook snapped. This fell during the night. I heard it from my room and came down. Footprints in the fresh frost on the terrace showed someone had fled through the French windows when disturbed. Major Blake exclaimed, Good God! Who? Poirot's gaze swept the room once more. At this moment, I do not accuse, but one among you made a false confession to me yesterday. All eyes turned to young Wilkins, who had tearfully claimed guilt the previous evening, saying he had taken the diamond in a moment of madness. Poirot spoke gently to him. You lied to protect someone, mon garçon, perhaps a sweetheart. Wilkins hung his head. Annie said she'd lose her place if... Annie the parlour-maid began to sob. Poirot raised his voice. Enough. The false confession confused me for a time, but it also revealed desperation. The real thief fears exposure now that the road's open. He walked to the windows and gazed out at the snow. Outside, the world returns. Soon the police will come with dogs, with experts. The tree will be stripped branch by branch. Every room searched again with greater thoroughness. But Hercule Poirot prefers a cleaner resolution. He turned back to the room. I give the thief one chance. Return the diamond before nightfall. Place it anonymously on the mantel in the library, and no charges will be pressed. The honour of the house preserved. Silence. Sir Reginald stood. I agree, if it ends here, quietly. Poirot watched every face. Carver mopped his brow. Sinclair's hands clenched. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Richard stared at his father in disbelief. Signorina Valenti rose, gracefully. Bravo, monsieur, she said softly. You play the drama well. Poirot bowed. It is not drama, Signorina. It is mercy and strategy. He dismissed the assembly. As the guests dispersed, whispering, Poirot lingered with Sir Reginald. You think they will take the offer? Sir Reginald asked. Poirot stroked his moustache. Someone will act before night. Fear is a powerful motivator. He moved to the window again. Far down the lane, the snowplow's orange light winked like a warning. In the drawing-room, tension coiled tighter than ever. Lady Harrington approached Poirot privately. You are certain it is one of us? She whispered. Certain, he replied. An outsider could not have engineered the darkness, known the exact moment, passed the guard so perfectly. She shivered. Then God help us all. Poirot watched her return to her husband, then climbed the stairs to his room. There he sat by the fire and reviewed every word spoken in the interrogation. The false confession had been meant to end the inquiry. The broken ornament last night showed panic. The thief was cornered. Outside, clouds gathered again, threatening fresh snow. Poirot allowed himself a small smile. Tonight, he murmured, or tomorrow at latest, the Christmas star will shine again, and the darkness will lift from Frostwood Manor. But whose hand would return it, and at what cost? The house waited, breathless, for the final act. Chapter 8. The Hidden Compartment. The afternoon of December 27th dragged heavily at Frostwood Manor. The snowplow's distant rumble had faded. Fresh flurries swirled again, delaying rescue once more. The house felt like a sealed box, its secrets pressing against the walls. Hercule Poirot spent the hours after the drawing-room confrontation in quiet activity. He walked the corridors with deliberate slowness, pausing at every antique cabinet, every carved chest, every piece of old furniture that might conceal a hiding place. Experience had taught him that English country houses were riddled with priest-holes, secret drawers, and forgotten compartments, remnants of Catholic persecution or smuggling days. He began in the hall, close to the Christmas tree. The tree itself had been thoroughly searched that morning, under his supervision. Ladders brought, ornaments removed one by one, branches shaken, nothing. The diamond had been retrieved from its temporary perch the previous night. Poirot was now certain of that, only to be hidden elsewhere before the thief was disturbed. He moved to a massive Elizabethan court cupboard against the panelling. Its carved doors depicted hunting scenes. Its surface was black with age. Poirot ran sensitive fingers along the mouldings, pressed, twisted, listened for the faint click of a hidden spring. Nothing. Next, a long refectory table with bulbous legs. He knelt, undignified but necessary, and examined the undersides. Dust, wormholes, but no false panel. Continued thus through the lower rooms, drawing room, morning room, gun room. In each he found minor discoveries, long-lost coins, a child's marble, a love letter yellowed with time, but never the glittering prize. At 4 o'clock he climbed to the first floor and entered the late Colonel Harrington's bedroom, preserved as a shrine since his death in 1920. Heavy mahogany furniture dominated, a vast four-poster, a tall boy, a gentleman's wardrobe with mirrored doors. Poirot's eyes lit on an oak blanket chest at the foot of the bed, 17th century, iron-bound, with a domed lid carved with the Harrington crest. He lifted the lid. Inside, folded Union flags, mothballed uniforms, a faded regimental drum. He removed them carefully, layer by layer, until the chest was empty. Then he tapped the base, solid oak, but with a faint hollow note near one corner. He pressed, twisted a carved acorn on the inner rim, and felt a soft resistance. A section of the bottom lifted like a tray, revealing a shallow compartment beneath. Inside lay 3 objects. First, a small leather pouch. Poirot opened it and spilled onto his palm a dozen loose diamonds, small but flawless, together with a folded note in Colonel Harrington's handwriting. Proceeds from discreet sales to cover debts of honour. Tell no one. Second, a bundle of love letters tied with blue ribbon, addressed to my darling Lily in a woman's hand, clearly not the Colonel's wife. Third, and most recent, a man's signet ring, heavy gold, engraved with the initials F.C., Felix Carver. Poirot's moustache quivered with satisfaction. Carver's ring, lost, perhaps deliberately placed, to suggest a hiding place already discovered and empty. But the diamond was not there. He replaced everything exactly, closed the compartment, and restored the chest's contents. As he straightened, he heard voices in the corridor, low, urgent. He stepped silently to the door, which stood ajar. Captain Richard and Signorina Valenti stood close together near the window at the end of the landing. Snowy light illuminated them, Richard's young face taut with worry, Valenti's gloved hand resting on his arm. "You mustn't confess, Caro," she was saying softly. "It would destroy everything. I can't let my father lose the estate," Richard replied, voice raw. If returning the stone quietly ends this, she touched his cheek. But you didn't take it. We both know that. Their eyes met. Something tender, desperate. Poirot withdrew silently. A romantic entanglement, complicating motives, perhaps providing alibis. He continued his search. In Sir Reginald's study, he examined the vault again, empty of course, and then the desk. A concealed drawer yielded old share certificates, worthless now. In Lady Harrington's boudoir, he found nothing but perfumed notepads and pressed flowers. Finally, in the long gallery, a dimly lit space lined with ancestral portraits, paused before a George III secretaire with elaborate marquetry. He had admired it earlier in the week. Now he opened the full front, revealing pigeonholes and tiny drawers. One drawer resisted slightly. He applied gentle pressure to the sides, and the entire back panel slid aside. A deeper compartment. Inside, a velvet pouch. Poirot's heart beat faster. He loosened the drawstring. Not the Christmas star, but a necklace of fine pearls, reported missing by Lady Harrington 6 months earlier. And beneath it, a folded slip of paper. He unfolded it. A single line typed, "More to come if demands not met." Blackmail. Poirot pocketed the note. So, there was an organized thief among the staff, or a guest directing one. He was closing the compartment when a sudden crash echoed from below. A heavy metallic clang followed by a woman's sharp cry. Poirot hurried downstairs. In the hall, guests and servants had gathered. A crystal chandelier in the ballroom lay shattered on the marble floor, its hundreds of drops scattered like frozen tears. The chain that had held it hung broken, swaying gently. Lady Harrington stood white-faced, one hand to her throat. "It fell, just fell. I was crossing the room, and it came down inches from me." Major Blake knelt among the wreckage. Chain's been filed almost through. Deliberate. All eyes turned instinctively to Poirot as he entered. "An accident intended to look like sabotage," he said calmly. "Or sabotage intended to look like an accident. The thief grows desperate." Sir Reginald's voice shook. "First the diamond, now this. Someone wants to frighten us into what?" "Into panic," Poirot replied. "Into rash actions. Someone wishes to recover the diamond quickly and escape before the police arrive." He addressed the group. "From this moment, no one walks alone. Pairs or groups only. The house is no longer safe." Murmurs of fear rippled. Victor Sinclair spoke for the first time that day, voice dry. "Perhaps we should burn the place down and be done with it. The curse wins." Miss Evelyn gave a small, hysterical laugh. Signorina Valenti crossed herself again. Poirot watched them all, noting who avoided whose gaze, who stood protectively close to whom. He drew Sir Reginald aside. "The hidden compartments yield treasures, but not yet the greatest one. The thief uses them as decoys. The real hiding place is cleverer still." Sir Reginald looked 10 years older. "How much longer, Poirot?" "Tonight," Poirot said firmly. "Or tomorrow at dawn. The pressure increases. The thief will break." Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Places were rearranged so no one sat isolated. Conversation faltered. Every creak of the old house made heads turn. Afterward, the party gathered in the drawing-room. Signorina Valenti sang, soft Neapolitan songs of lost love that seemed to deepen the melancholy rather than relieve it. At 10 o'clock, Poirot excused himself, pleading fatigue, but instead positioned himself in the shadows of the upper landing, watching the hall below. One by one the guests retired. Captain Richard lingered longest, speaking quietly to Valenti at the foot of the stairs. Then she ascended, and he followed, towards separate wings, yet Poirot noted the glance they exchanged. Midnight came. The house settled into uneasy quiet. At 12:30, Poirot heard it. The soft creak of a door, muffled footsteps on the main staircase. He waited. A figure emerged into the hall below, tall, cloaked in a dark dressing gown. Moonlight through the fanlight revealed the face briefly. Felix Carver. Carver moved to the Christmas tree, now stripped and forlorn, and stood gazing up as though expecting the diamond to materialize. Then he crossed to the Elizabethan court cupboard Poirot had examined earlier, opened it, felt inside. Empty. He tried the refectory table next, kneeling, searching beneath. Nothing. Frustration evident in his movements, Carver straightened and looked around, listening. Poirot remained motionless. Finally, Carver left the hall, ascending the stairs with careful quiet. Poirot waited 5 minutes, then followed at a distance. Carver entered his bedroom and closed the door. Poirot did not hesitate. He continued along the corridor to the back stairs, descended to the servants' quarters, and roused Mrs. Harding gently. "Madame, I need your master key, and absolute silence." Together they returned upstairs. At Carver's door, Poirot listened. Soft snores already. He inserted the key, turned it with infinite care, and slipped inside. Moonlight striped the room. Carver lay in bed, breathing evenly, too evenly. Poirot searched swiftly. Dressing gown on a chair, slippers beside the bed, suitcase open. In the pocket of the dressing gown, a small penknife with a fine blade, perfect for filing a chandelier chain. Under the mattress, a folded map of the estate with certain outbuildings circled, and in the toe of a slipper, a tightly rolled bundle of banknotes, several £100, but no diamond. Poirot withdrew as silently as he had entered. In the corridor, he met Mrs. Harding's anxious eyes. "Progress," he whispered, "but not conclusion." He returned to his room, lit a small candle, and sat reviewing the day's discoveries. Hidden diamonds and secrets in the blanket chest, blackmail pearls, a sabotaged chandelier, Carver searching desperately. The thief, or an accomplice, was preparing escape. Poirot looked out at the snow, still falling softly. "One more night," he murmured, "one more push, and the Christmas star will return to the light." But he knew the danger was growing. The next attempt might not be a falling chandelier. It might be a blade in the dark. The house slept uneasily, waiting for dawn. Chapter 9. The Star's Secret. The night of December 27th settled over Frostwood Manor like a heavy velvet curtain. Fresh snow had fallen again in the evening, erasing footprints, muffling sound, restoring the estate's isolation. The snowplough had turned back. The telephone lines remained silent. One more night, Poirot thought, and perhaps the roads would open at dawn. But the thief would not wait for dawn. Poirot sat in the library long after the house had retired, a single lamp burning beside him. On the table lay the fragments he had gathered. Victor Sinclair's bitter notebook, the blackmail note from the secretaire, the burned scrap from the study grate, the strand of dark woman's hair from the still room, Carver's signet ring and penknife, the map with circled outbuildings. He arranged them in a neat semicircle, then leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes half closed. The little grey cells turned and turned. One fact had troubled him from the beginning. The Christmas star had vanished in full view, yet no one had been seen to take it. The open case, the 2 seconds of darkness, the guard inches away, all pointed to a sleight so perfect it bordered on conjuring. But conjurers, Poirot knew, relied on misdirection. He rose suddenly and crossed to the bookshelf where he had found the family chronicle. He pulled down the volume again and turned to the photograph of Colonel Harrington holding the diamond. He studied it closely under the lamp. The stone hung on a fine platinum chain. Yes, but there was something odd about the setting. The 8-pointed star was mounted on a small backing plate, almost like a brooch that could be detached. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He fetched a magnifying glass from Sir Reginald's desk and examined the image intently. There, faint but visible, a tiny hinge and catch on the reverse of the star. The Christmas star was not merely a pendant, it was reversible. The back was a hollow compartment designed perhaps to conceal a miniature portrait or a lock of hair in Victorian times, or, in modern times, something else. Poirot closed the book with a soft snap. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "the diamond never left the display case at all." He strode to the hall. The great tree was gone now, dismantled that morning, but the empty pedestal and glass case remained, waiting for police inspection. Poirot examined the white satin cushion once more, pressing it gently. Nothing. But the cushion had been removed and examined a dozen times. He lifted the entire case, light, portable, and carried it back to the library. There, under strong light, he studied the base. A faint seam ran around the underside of the velvet-lined tray. He pressed, twisted, and the tray lifted out like a drawer. Beneath it, in a shallow recess lined with black felt, lay the Christmas star. Not stolen, hidden in plain sight within the display case itself. The platinum chain was coiled neatly. The stone blazed even in the lamplight, cold and triumphant. Poirot exhaled slowly. The thief had not taken the diamond away. He, or she, had simply opened the secret back, removed the stone from its front mounting, a matter of seconds, dropped it into the hidden compartment, and closed everything again. In darkness, with everyone staring at the suddenly empty cushion, no one thought to dismantle the case itself. Brilliant, audacious, but why? To buy time, to wait for a safe moment to retrieve it? Poirot carried the case upstairs to his room and locked it in his suitcase. The diamond was safe now, but the game was not over. He needed to know who had engineered such a deception, and why the recent panic, the chandelier, the midnight searches. At 2 a.m, he heard it. The soft creak of floorboards in the corridor, the faint click of a latch. He opened his door a fraction. A figure in a dark dressing gown moved stealthily down the main staircase, Signorina Lucia Valenti. Poirot followed at a distance, silent in stockinged feet. She went not to the hall, but to the gun-room at the rear of the house. Moonlight through the windows showed her opening a cupboard, removing a small bundle wrapped in silk. She unwrapped it carefully. A man's leather glove, the grey kid glove found beneath the tree, and inside it a folded paper. She read it quickly, then slipped it into her pocket. Poirot stepped forward. "Signorina," he said quietly. She whirled, hand flying to her throat. "Monsieur Poirot!" Her voice was low, shaken. "You frighten me. What do you have there?" She hesitated, then drew out the paper. It was a letter in Captain Richard's handwriting. "My dearest Lucia, if anything happens to me, know that I took the diamond only to save the estate. Carver will foreclose unless the stone is sold quietly abroad. I plan to return it once the buyer paid. Forgive me for involving you. Burn this." Our Poirot read it twice. "So, Captain Richard claims responsibility," he said softly. "Yet the diamond was never taken from the case. This is a forgery, Signorina, intended to protect someone, or to mislead me." Her dark eyes filled with tears. "I do not know. Richard gave me the glove on Christmas night, said to keep it safe. Tonight I could not sleep. I came to read the letter again." Poirot studied her face. "Fear, yes, but love also." "You care for the Capitaine?" She lifted her chin. "Yes, deeply. He is desperate to save his father, the house, everything. If he did this thing—" "He did not," Poirot said firmly, "but someone wishes us to believe he did." A sudden noise, running footsteps outside. Poirot moved swiftly to the window. In the moonlight, he saw a figure dashing across the snow toward the stables, tall, male, carrying a small case. Captain Richard himself. Valenti gasped. "He is leaving!" Poirot acted instantly. "Stay here," he ordered, and raced upstairs for his shoes and coat. Minutes later he was outside, the cold air knife-sharp, following the deep footprints in the fresh snow. The stables lay 200 yards from the house. The great doors stood open. Inside, a deep lantern glowed. Richard was saddling a horse, movements frantic. "Capitaine!" Poirot called. Richard spun, face distraught. "Stay back, Poirot. I'm sorry, I have to go." "With the diamond you do not possess?" Richard froze. Poirot stepped closer. "I have recovered the Christmas star. It never left the display case. Your letter to Signorina Valenti is a forgery. Someone uses you as a scapegoat." Richard's shoulders sagged. "Then it's over?" "Not yet, but you must return to the house. Running would condemn you." Slowly, Richard nodded. Together they walked back through the snow. The horse left unsaddled. In the hall they found chaos. Lights blazing, guests in dressing gowns, servants milling. Felix Carver stood in the centre, holding a revolver. "I heard someone leave," he barked. "Thought it was the thief making a run for it. Where the devil have you been, Richard?" Richard explained quietly. Carver lowered the gun, but his eyes darted nervously. Poirot watched him and saw the faint tremor in the hand that held the weapon. Then Valenti appeared at the stairs, pale but composed. Sir Reginald emerged, demanding answers. Poirot raised his voice. "Enough! Return to your rooms. Tomorrow, at dawn, we end this. The police will come, but Hercule Poirot will present the solution first." Slowly, the house settled again, though no one slept. Poirot returned to his room, the diamond secure. He sat by the window, watching the snow cease, stars emerging cold and bright. The forged letter. The hidden compartment known only to family or to someone who had studied the old photographs closely. Victor Sinclair's grudge. Carver's debts and penknife. Evelyn's resentment, Richard's desperation, Valenti's loyalty, and the woman's dark hair in the still room, Valenti's hair. But she had not taken the stone. The pieces shifted, almost aligned. One more revelation was needed. Poirot closed his eyes. When dawn came, pale and icy, he would gather them all once more. The Christmas star's greatest secret was not its hiding place. It was the heart of the person who had concealed it, and why. The final act approached. Chapter 10. The Festive Resolution. Dawn on December 28th broke cold and clear over Frostwood Manor. The snow had stopped during the night, and a pale sun glinted off the endless white fields. Far down the valley road, the steady growl of the snowplough could be heard once more, this time advancing without pause. Hercule Poirot stood at his bedroom window, watching the distant orange vehicle creep closer. He held the Christmas star in his palm. Even in daylight, it burned within a fire, the 8 pointed facets catching the sun like captured frost. "Today," he murmured to his reflection as he smoothed his moustache, "order and truth return to this house." By 9 o'clock, the entire household, guests and senior servants alike, had been summoned to the ballroom. The shattered chandelier had been swept away. The bare marble floor and tall mirrors gave the room a stark judicial air. Fires roared at either end, yet the atmosphere remained chilled. Sir Reginald and Lady Harrington sat together on a raised dais that had once held the orchestra. The other guests occupied chairs arranged in a semicircle. Captain Richard beside Signorina Valenti, Miss Evelyn Drake pale and tense, Felix Carver mopping his brow with a handkerchief, Victor Sinclair rigid as a statue, Major Blake and the Dowager Aunt completing the circle. The servants stood in a respectful line along the wall. Poirot entered last, small and impeccable, in a dark suit with a white carnation in his buttonhole. In his hands he carried the black velvet display case. All conversation ceased. He placed the case on a table in the centre, exactly where the pedestal had stood on Christmas Eve. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice ringing clear in the high room, "we reach the end of our little drama. The road's open, the police approach, but Hercule Poirot prefers always to present the truth himself, with logic and clarity." He paused, letting his gaze travel slowly over every face. 4 nights ago, the Christmas star vanished before 40 witnesses in 2 seconds of darkness. Impossible? No, merely audacious. The stone did not leave this room. It did not pass through pockets or sleeves. It was never hooked into the tree, nor hidden in secret compartments, nor smuggled below stairs. It remained exactly where it had been placed, inside the display case. A ripple of astonishment. Poirot opened the case with deliberate care. The white satin cushion lay empty, as it had for days. He lifted the cushion tray, revealing the hidden recess beneath. There, on black felt, blazed the diamond. Gasps echoed through the room. Sir Reginald half rose. All this time, in the case itself. "Precisely," Poirot said. "The Christmas star has a secret known to few. It is reversible. The magnificent star mounting is a cover that unhooks from the back plate. In darkness, with the lid already open, one needs only to reach in, unclip the stone from its front setting, a matter of 3 seconds at most, drop it into the compartment below the tray, and withdraw the hand. The cushion appears empty, panic ensues. No one thinks to dismantle the case itself, for why would they? The thief has vanished the diamond in full view, yet left it exactly where everyone could see the case, guarded day and night." Lady Harrington whispered, "But who?" Poirot raised a hand. "First, the darkness. The lights failed simultaneously throughout the ground floor. Not a fuse blown, not wires cut. Simply the master switch thrown in the cellar for 2 seconds and released. A servant could do it, or someone familiar with the house." He turned to the line of staff. Thomas, the footman beside the case, never moved, yet the hand passed within inches of him. Why did he not feel the air move? Because the thief approached from behind him, using his body as shield from the watchers opposite. Poirot's eyes moved to the guests. Now, motives, many existed: Sir Reginald's debts, Captain Richard's fear for the estate, Mr. Carver's desire to force a sale or foreclosure, Mr. Sinclair's old grudge, Miss Drake's sense of disinheritance. Yet only one person combined motive, opportunity, and intimate knowledge of the diamond's secret mechanism. He paused, letting the silence stretch. That person is Sir Reginald Harrington himself. A collective cry of shock. Sir Reginald rose slowly, face ashen. "Poirot, what madness is this?" "No madness," Poirot replied gently. "Logic. You wished to sell the diamond quietly to save the estate, but family pride forbade an open sale. You needed it to disappear, to be stolen, so insurance could be claimed, or a discreet foreign buyer found without scandal. You ignored your father's warning never to display it publicly again. You arranged the unveiling with fanfare. You left the case lid open for better viewing. You ensured the master switch could be reached quickly. And on the night, you stood closest to the pedestal when you gave the toast. When the lights failed, thrown by your own prearranged signal, you reached behind Thomas, unclipped the stone, dropped it into the hidden compartment you alone knew existed from childhood, and withdrew your hand. The alarm never sounded because nothing passed the wire. The stone fell downward inside the case. Sir Reginald's mouth worked soundlessly. Poirot continued softly. The later incidents were yours also, to heighten panic, to make the theft seem the work of a desperate outsider. The filed chandelier chain to frighten your wife into agreeing to sell other jewels. The forged letter in Richard's handwriting, placed in the glove for Signorina Valenti to find, so suspicion would settle on your son if needed. The midnight searches to suggest a frantic thief. You burned incriminating notes in your study grate. You left your business partner's ring in the old blanket chest to mislead, but you overlooked small things. The scrap of your personal paper in the ashes, the ease with which the lights returned, and above all, the diamond itself, hidden too cleverly in the one place no thief would choose, the scene of the crime. Sir Reginald sank back into his chair, an old man suddenly. Lady Harrington reached for his hand, tears on her cheeks. "Why, Reginald?" she whispered. He looked at her, then at the assembled company, voice breaking. The estate, everything crumbling, debts I could not confess. I thought, a theft, insurance, a fresh start, no one hurt. The stone recovered later, perhaps. I never meant. Captain Richard stood, face rigid with conflicting emotions, anger, pity, love. "Father, you should have told me." Poirot spoke again kindly now. "You gave me one last clue, Sir Reginald. Yesterday, when I offered the thief a chance to return the diamond anonymously, you agreed at once, too readily. A real thief would have hesitated. But you knew it could be found in the case at any time, ending the affair quietly." He stepped forward and placed the Christmas star in Sir Reginald's trembling hands. "It is yours to restore, or to sell openly now, with honour. The choice is yours. Hercule Poirot will say nothing to the police beyond the facts of recovery. A Christmas miracle, perhaps." Silence reigned. Then Signorina Valenti rose and began to sing, softly, unaccompanied, the ancient carol, Silent Night. Her voice, pure and aching, filled the room. One by one, others joined. Lady Harrington's trembling soprano, Major Blake's baritone, even the servants in the doorway. Sir Reginald bowed his head, tears falling onto the blazing diamond. Outside, the snowplough reached the gates at last, its engine roaring like a herald. But inside Frostwood Manor, something gentler had arrived. Forgiveness, truth, and the faint, fragile hope of renewal. When the song ended, Poirot bowed to the company. "Joyeux Noël," he said quietly. "The star has returned, and with it, light." He turned and left the room, his small figure precise against the vast ballroom. Behind him, the Harrington family closed around their patriarch, voices low, the diamond catching the firelight like a promise. Outside, the snow began to melt under the rising sun.